All right, so let me get the essentials out of the way. Please consider the other channels and subscribing there. Please consider supporting this channel through channel memberships. And I definitely foresee the early part of this video will be like fine, but when we get into Nora and the N-word issue, I'm sure some people are going to get really tense. But let's start with Liz Gale and a little bit of Surge and just summarize where we are. So Surge put out a video charging that Aaron's SPTV Foundation, which he was on the board of, has been very insensitive, cruel, and not being helpful to him and his husband, Michael, and just not generally supportive of, quote, the movement. So, where is the movement? Well, it's hard to place it because another ex Scientologist also was complaining about the SPTV Foundation being very brutal and cruel. And Liz Gale, remember her? The gingerbread woman? Anyway, she recently got injured, so I want to be careful not to misinterpret her. So she put out this community post about, guys, I'm so sad. I need more helps. Okay, now it could be cynically she's trying to distract people from these revelations. And she was in one of these chats and says, oh, I have so much to say about this. Okay, was she typing with her hand? She says her arms are injured. So, anyway, as always with these ex-Scientology people, it's a lot of confusion. Again, I want to be clear. Some ex-Scientology people subscribe to this channel, so they're not all bad. But I think it's fair to say a lot of them are, to put it mildly, very damaged. And that gets us to Nora. And I'll just deal briefly. I didn't watch the whole video because I had to stop at a certain point because it got laughably bad. But I'll give Nora points. I'm going to put out a video that is pretty anti-Nora. However, I think it is a little out of date. I think she is trying to pivot a little bit. It's not a full pivot, let's be very clear. But she's toned down some of her toxicity because she was quite literally one of the most toxic people in this space of the SPTV people. And where she is even, I don't know. She's no longer really supporting the SPTV Foundation, not supporting Aaron. They're no longer friends, but she still has a lot of, quote, bad habits. But apparently she proposed, rather ridiculously, to start a foundation. Now, she's not being completely silly. She recognizes this will take time, but her starting a foundation, I am like, really? Okay, I don't have high expectations of Nora as a serious activist or educator, but I do think she's getting better. Out of nowhere, she does this community post and, slipping back into old habits saying, guys, I feel so victimized again. I am so victimized. Well, let's deal with that issue. Is she an N word? Well, it's definitely complicated. And this is even more complicated because I've studied this thing over 20 years. So I've read so many books and articles on the subjects of fascism, Nazism, and authoritarianism. Strap in. This may get either a little boring or intriguing, but let's go through what exactly is a Nazi? What is a fascist? Because it's a very long story. So let me begin with a very good, concise guide, which is called Paxton's Anatomy of Fascism. He deals mainly with the Italian fascists and the Nazis in Germany. However, he does go through a lot of other case studies. And as he admits, he's a historian. There's really no unified theory. There's a lot of conjectures, but we really don't know how fascism started or even what it is. It definitely does exist. We've seen these fascist movements, right? Fascist regimes. They call themselves fascist. However, when you really study Mussolini, Hitler, and these various other leaders, Perón in Argentina, right? Chiang Kai shek in China, you go through the list, Franco, there's just a lot of debates. Some people say Franco is not a fascist. He's authoritarian, he was a dictator, he was evil, but he was not a fascist technically. Other people say he was definitely a fascist. He fits all the boxes. So that's the question. Well, what is a fascist? What makes a fascist? What makes a Nazi? There is no real consensus. So I can only give some conjectures here of what I think are the benchmarks and why Nora would, good or bad, fit. I've found two major recurrent things. One is the mythology of a hero, right? That's very deeply embedded in fascist mythologies. Obviously, Hitler is the main case, right? He promoted himself as a hero and savior of Germany. So, mythology of a hero is very central to a lot of fascist movements. And this is where Nora will come in. And I found this pretty pervasive as well, is this kind of victimization or persecution complex, namely that the fascist leaders and followers think they're victims of a larger conspiracy. And this is very pervasive. Look at the Nation of Islam, right? Louis Farrakhan. he always says that the white man is hurting the black man and people of color. There's always a larger conspiracy to destroy you and your group, right? And the Germans, there's this pervasive paranoia that they lost the war because the Jews or the communists or the gays or the feminists, yeah, there were feminists back then, but all these groups somehow subverted Germany and they didn't really lose the war. Somebody or something made them lose the war, and their suffering in the 1920s and 1930s was due to this subversive group. These are very pervasive things in fascist movements: conspiracy theories, this paranoia about being a victim, and this mythology of a hero. Now, does this sound familiar? Because it should, because that is definitely the content that Aaron Smith-Levin and Serge Delmar put out. I mean, it's just there all the time. All the time they're saying, we are such victims. We're being victimized. Oh my God. Oh my God. Now, to be fair, with any mythology, there is a fact, right? It is a fact. Germany did lose World War I, and they suffered a lot. They did. The suffering among the German people was not small. There were, to put it mildly, these massive economic social crises in the 1920s and 1930s, right? This is real. There was massive unemployment. This was something a lot of the democracies suffered from in that time period. So these were real things. Fascists do hook on to things that are real because the victimization could be real. The problem is the mythologization, right? It's when you add these mythologies, that's when things get really dangerous. It's one thing to say a country suffers from massive unemployment or inflation, like today, but then the question becomes, well, who is to blame or why is it happening? That's a more difficult question to answer. Now, Serge and Aaron have pretty simplified answers. The answer is, well, why am I suffering? Well, Aaron gives you P. Diddy, Tom Cruise, David Miscavige. Serge is a little bit more bat crazy, but it's kind of the same theme. That David Miscavige and these adult Scientologists, and even the parents in Scientology, even ex-Scientologists who refuse to do the Nimkiss, and don't ask about Nimkiss, it's like most of his madcap ideas, they don't make any sense. We have a group that feels very persecuted, and they're looking for the quote, conspirators or conspiracies, and they promote themselves as heroic saviors. Now, to be fair, Nora's not as bad. She used to do this stuff. Just this summer, she was going crazy that Mike Rinder was the devil man, right, in this mythology. And if we just put Mike Rinder in jail, everything will be good. Hallelujah, my brothers and sisters, and so on and so forth. So broadly, that's what fascism seems to be. It's a mythology, and it's structured around victimization, finding these heroes, and blaming these massive conspiracies. Now, that's my conjecture. Other people have different theories, right? The Marxists say it's just capitalists try to control you. It's not real. It's just a mythology to fool people. And then you have feminists who say it's all about masculinity. It's about men not being able to be men, and they're having all these persecutions and basically projecting their fears. And then you keep going on and on and on. Some people say the Nazis were too extreme to be fascists. Some people say fascism is not even a real thing, right? There's just many different schools of thought. Some people think Hitler's a strong dictator, weak dictator. Some people say that he planned from the beginning to commit war and genocide. Opposite people say it was more improvised. There's just, to put it mildly, a massive literature on all sides. I'm just giving my point of view. So could you call Nora, Serge, and Aaron fascist? Definitely yes. They fit all the benchmarks as far as I know. But fascism is a continuum. So at this point, good or bad, I'd have to say Serge and Aaron are extreme fascists. They are really lost in their own fairy tales and their own mythologies of being the hero to save everyone. And I think they're frankly very lunatics, frankly. That's where they are. Nora is a little bit more calm and moderate. She is definitely more willing to listen to different people. And she has stressed that, listen, guys, don't break the law, right? You can protest, but don't break the law. Some of her stuff is just silly. Like, listen, I have criticisms of DOA. I'm sure you have criticism of DOA. But her panic attack that somehow DOA was going to destroy democracy is just ridiculous. It was just ridiculous. But that is what something that a fascist would say, right? They polarize everything into black and white. We're either being saved completely or we're going to be destroyed by this or that group. Nora is gay. However, I don't think that helps her out. I think Nora is confused about what these subjects are. So she would probably say, you're so stupid. Nora cannot be a Nazi. She's beautiful and gay. She even likes Black Jesus. Oh my God. What are you, stupid? She's like so gay. It's right there in the intro. Right. Well, first of all, gay people were fascists. Look it up. This is a real thing. We even have black soldiers who are Nazis. So maybe do some more research. Second of all, as I noted, fascism can come in different forms. You could be an extreme fascist, a moderate fascist, or even a weak fascist. You only like a little part of fascist ideology. So maybe Nora, best case, is like a minimal fascist. She only does fascism a little bit. I still think it's pretty dangerous, but that's me. Also, stressing that you follow the law, yeah, fascists did that. Like Perón in Argentina, he came to power legitimately through elections. Granted, those elections were corrupt, but most elections are corrupt. So this is a really difficult case if you do fascism seriously, right? As a body of scholarly research, because Perón did seem to win legitimately several times. So you're like, so this is a really weird case of quote democratic fascism. And you may not believe it, but the numbers are there that things got better, right? Women, workers, and other people did improve under Perón. Good or bad. I know people on the left don't want to hear these things, but listen, in some cases, fascism does work. It does actually help people. We just got to deal with the facts. So Perón's a very difficult case. And I'm not fascist, I'm very anti fascist, but we should be truthful about what fascism is and what it is not. Now, I'm making the case that you can call Nora a fascist and a Nazi. Should you call her a fascist and Nazi? That's a different question. I think she is trying to get better a little bit. We should encourage that because before she was just unbearably toxic. However, you got to call what you think is the truth, as far as you know it. She's still pretty delusional and dangerous, and her trying to get like easy sympathy with this kind of community post just shows she's not being serious. That said, again, I don't think it's helpful to call her a Nazi or a Hitler or a fascist all the time. I don't think that's productive. Again, these things can be debated. Some people do think Trump, for instance, is a Nazi, a fascist, a Hitler. I'm sure Nora thinks Trump is a hot Hitler, Nazi, fascist, whatever. However, you got to think about these things seriously. Nazism is many things. Yes, racism and that ideology of racism is central to it. But when you're studying these things more critically, you have to look at the structure of the ideology. What is really important is you find a victim in a conspiracy. And again, look it up. You can Google this in 3 seconds. The Italian fascists, for instance, were not particularly racist in the beginning stages. They actually had a lot of Italian Jews. Yes, a lot of Jews were fascists in the Italian movement. These things are complicated. I would advise people not to use this terminology unless they do the research. However, if you do the research, it is pretty sad, but it is there. Fascism is on the rise. It's a very popular philosophy. It's a very attractive philosophy. If you want to join it, that is your choice. I am not a fascist. I am not a Nazi. I don't find it particularly attractive, but it is out there. If Nora wants to continue down the fascist road, that is her business. I'm just trying to be analytic about things. So at this point, Serge and Aaron are lost in complete fascist fantasy land. Are they going to become future Hitlers? Maybe, maybe not, but they certainly are doing alarming things. Nora at least is calming down and moderating herself. But again, you can still be a moderate fascist and be a bad person. So the best I can do for her is she's moderating her fascism, and it's less crazy than Aaron or Serge. Still not very good. And so the idea of her forming a human rights foundation is frankly silly. But hey, you know, fascism is a pretty silly ideology at the end of the day. It's a very clownish ideology.